Hey folks, NATO here. Got a new video today about my Sentinel build here, the full debuff build for mod 33 Jotunskar. I have a build document that accompanies this video. It is currently in the description, so go ahead and look at that if you're looking for the specifics of the build. Covers everything you might need to know about the debuff build, and at the end it shows you the preferred aggro rotation that I use to keep aggro in all situations. So let's go ahead and get started. Gear page here. Helmet is the awareness and the critical avoidance stacker from Master Jotunskar MJS. A good alternative with the exact same bonus is going to come from MSH, Master Soul Harvest, the Helm of the Unyielding Bastion. Again, the same bonus, just different stat allocations. A little bit less awareness, a little bit less critical avoidance. The chest piece is the action point chest piece. There really is no alternative to this one if you're going to be running a debuff tank build. This chest piece comes from the Menzo store. Go ahead and buy this in the armory for AD and campaign currency, and then you can upgrade it to Mythic in the Demon Web store here, just in the armory again for, again, more campaign currency. In terms of arms, we've got the Antiquated Drought Priestsmiths. This one lowers the target's awareness by 2% by 10 seconds. It has a 10% chance of proccing on your attacks. Now, this isn't a significant extra source of damage, but it still is an extra source of damage. And as a barbarian tank, you really don't need any additional aggro pieces to keep aggro effectively. So I've switched out the arms for these ones just to provide more utility for the group. Alternatives, especially if you're struggling to keep aggro, I would just use the MJS arms if you have them. Otherwise, the same thing for MSH. Almost the exact same bonus for the gauntlets of the Unyielding Bastion. Weapons is always going to be masterwork. Again, if you go on debuff, there really is no alternative to this. I mean, if you're not going to use masterwork, you might as well just use anything else you have. Boots, I still use the ones from the Dragon Slayer campaign because they are the best in terms of the amount of HP you gain when it procs versus the MSOD boots, the Celestial ones. So these ones give you 20% HP versus the MSOD boots only give you 15% for the ghosted bonus here. So we'll go ahead and look at that. So you can see what I'm talking about here. So you see they only give you about 15% HP versus 20% from the Dragon Slayer. I guess if you're looking for item level and more defensive stats, I would go with these ones. But if you're looking for the best in slot boots for a tank, I would go with the Dragon Slayer boots. Neck and waist, it's either going to be the Apocalypse set or the Merilith set. So right now we're in the Apocalypse set. The Merilith set's right there. Merilith gives you a bunch more item level and a bit more stats. But the Apocalypse set is going to be more popular, especially if you're running with a Cleric or with a Warlock Healer, as they will most likely be using the Merilith set. Otherwise, if you're running with a Bard or an Oathbound Paladin, OP Healer, they're most likely going to use the Vistani set. So go ahead and switch over to the Merilith set if you feel the need for more item level, for a little bit more HP. The ring is going to be the running aggro ring from MJS, upgraded here, the Frost Silver Hoop of Tenacity. And then the other ring is the Watcher's Gaze, which is just sustain aggro and gives me a whole bunch of crit strike. So I like that to cap my crit strike there for the raw stat. I would not use the Manicore's main bite ring here or the helmet, especially in Master Jotunskar, because the constant dot that happens in the dungeon is actually going to proc your Manicore main's bite, so it might not even go on the boss. So it's just a waste of time there. I would not use it. Not recommended. Shirt and pants. I've got the Stone Vein straps and the Stone Vein harness. It's a stacker for defense awareness, and then also gives you crit avoidance, and the set bonus is 4% defense, so it just helps you cap the stats, or defensive stats there. Enhancements. So for this build, I am sacrificing everything I can to give the most debuff possible. So a lot of times, other barbarian tanks will have their offensive enchantments be Garnet to try to max out their power as high as they can to get more aggro generation. But since I'm trying to proc the Apocalypse set, where every hit with a critical strike, it increases damage taken for 5 seconds up to 5 stacks, I want to make sure I'm keeping those stacks up at full, at the 5. So I want to have my crit strike as high as I can get within reason. So you can see here the crit strike raw stat maxed out at about 51%. And then for the other ones, the diamond and the ruby are just to satisfy the requirements for the aggro ring here for the extra defense, extra crit avoid. And then the fire agate and 2 garnets are just to help me max out the raw stats for my 3 main defensive stats, the defense, awareness, and crit avoid. Using the 5% max HP overload and also the 5% crit avoid, 5% deflect chance, other overload. Common enchantment, rhyme temper, and then always movement speed for your bonus enchantment. Primary artifact for a tank, especially in a dungeon, is usually always going to be the Mythalar fragment. If you're in a trial, you could use other ones like the Heart of the Volcano or the Tentacle Rod. Just depends on what your group needs. Secondary artifacts are my stat sticks. Got to have the Apocalypse Dagger to finish off the Apocalypse set. And then I have the 2 tank artifacts here, the Crimson Calamity and the Sealing Parchment. For 1, they give defensive stats. 2, they give 15% stam regen each, so a total of 30% stam regen. And 3, their combined rating is the same as their total item level, which means when you equip these artifacts here, you are not losing any raw stats when you equip them. Versus something like Mythalar, where the combined rating is 960 and the item level is 1200. So when you equip this, you're essentially losing 240 raw stat points in stats other than what's on the actual artifact. So other than accuracy and combat advantage, you're losing 240 of each stat in your page here, besides the ones listed on the artifacts. So that's something nice to look at when you're looking at artifacts to equip. In terms of powers, so this is my single target setup here. At wills are always going to be Sure Strike and Sentinel Slash. This is going to be for both single target and multi-target. Sentinel Slash is going to be your big aggro threat generation move here for at will. And then I have big one is Takedown, and then Punishing Charge, and Indomitable Battle Strike. Dailies for a single target, mostly going to be Crescendo. And then I just have Battle High here just in case we get into some sticky situations. Usually doesn't happen in MJS, but in trials like MSOD, it came in very handy for mitigation. And then for class features, always going to have Trample the Fallen and Threatening Presence. Threatening Presence for the aggro generation and Trample the Fallen for the added damage for the group. And then feats, Frustrating Slash. Again, makes your Sentinel Slash generate increased aggro for 5 seconds. I like to slot on the move for my not so fast. It increases the magnitude and also gives you that 20% move speed bonus to 4 seconds, which is really why I use it. If you're struggling for aggro, go ahead and slot the top one. It's going to make your IBS, your Indomitable Battle Strike, have a higher magnitude, up to 1000, up from 750. So that should help you a bit with the aggro generation for the rotation. Otherwise, if you want the utility of the movement speed, go ahead and use it on the move. Third one, Disarming Takedown. This just increases takedown's effectiveness, so it increases the target's damage taken from physical attacks by 5% for 10 seconds. So that's always good for the group there. Versus the Boasting Takedown. Again, if you're having trouble holding aggro, go ahead and use the bottom one. It makes takedown increased threat generation here, but top one always recommended for group utility for more damage. Fourth feat, Inspiring Bravado. These two really don't matter. They're just for mitigation. You don't need any mitigation in MJS, but I always choose the bottom one. For Battle High, increase the hit points of you and nearby allies by 15%. And then last one, Rage and Rally. So your Rage or your Unstoppable now increases your threat generated, which is going to be a big thing for your artifact calls to help you keep aggro. And then when it ends, you're going to restore up to 40% of your maximum stamina again, which is awesome. Because when you're using Rage, whenever you get hit by anything, it automatically consumes your stamina. Versus the Blood Fury, where your Rage cost is reduced to 30, but it's going to increase your hit points, it's going to restore hit points. When it's over, it's not really useful. I'd rather have the increased threat and the increased and regen. And then for AoE powers or multi-target, at-wills are the exact same. I'm using for encounters, not so fast. Again, it's for the AoE damage and for the speed boost, the 20% 4 seconds. Come and Get It, which is your hard taunt and also gathers up crowd controllable enemies, which is really nice for a whole bunch of other DPS that aren't AoE as well. Just kind of groups up enemies for faster killing. And then always slotting Takedown for that extra damage increase from physical attacks from the third feat here. Class features and feats are the exact same, so it's easy to do a power swap as you're running. Very convenient. And then for dailies, I do Crescendo, and I also do the Spin to Strike or the Spin to Win, which is very fun, especially in MJS. Especially first boss, just you're spinning in there with all the basilisks and the Remoras. Very nice. In terms of boons, we got the Skill Stronghold boons. I use the Crit Strike, Defense, and the Movement Speed. Obviously, if you die, though, as a tank, you're going to want to switch to the Revive Sickness, but you really shouldn't be dying. Campaign boons, I only have 127. I think there's like 4 or 5 more I can get from the new campaign, but just haven't done that yet. It's the one I'm working with, so I've got all the master boons that give you damage and health. So Bloodlust is one of them. It gives you more damage against the boss to generate more threat. Also increases your action point gain. Life Lessons, another damaging one. Again, really good for aggro generation. Also gives you a heal at the end there. Enhanced Application. This is a heal one and a damage reduction one. Bless Advantage, another heal one, also adds power and recharge. And then Bless Resilience, this adds defense, hit points, and heals your stamina, which is nice. Advanced boons, got the Forte, Stam Regen, Action Point, and Recharge, just so I can get my powers out as fast as I can and generate enough AP to get a daily for every artifact call. And then have all the defense ones, most of the health ones, the Demonic Mastery for increased damage and damage resistance against fiends, and then the movement speed and the lingering medicine, which every single class should have. Alright, so companions, this is what my page looks like. Got the 3 companion gear from the new zone there, from the Jotunskar. Gives awareness, crit avoid. Alternatives can be from the Molten Belt of the Companion, from Hotnell there. Otherwise, you can get a couple from the new Thay zone, but never ended up buying those. Companion enhancement, it's always going to be one of 3, either armor break, dulled senses, or vulnerability. I would not recommend any other companion enhancement other than those 3. And then in terms of actual companions for the slotting here, always have to have raptors to increase your group's power. You get a total of 22.5% with everything, including your own. I got Brunner here for the extra awareness and defense. The Lich for the reducing incoming damage, DR by 9%. And then the 2 debuff ones, so Jagged Blade is going to give you 10% chance on encounter use to increase the target's damage taken by 3% for 10 seconds. Again, similar to the arms, it's not going to be a significant damage increase, but it is just an additional source of damage for your DPS. So it's always nice to run that, and I'm sure your DPS will appreciate it. And then Lacera for the Spiteful Hex. It gives me 4.5% defense and also increases the damage by 4.5% taken by an enemy for 10 seconds. Whenever you are struck by a critical strike or whenever you are critically healed. It works both ways, so it's very effective. You just have to make sure you're by the boss when it procs, otherwise it won't go on the boss. In terms of summon companions, so the 5 that I would recommend in a dungeon setting would be your Spine Devil. If you're added percent damage against the boss when it debuffs him. You're going to want your Tutor and your Flapjack for your 5% each of combat advantage. Black Death Scorpion, depending on the group composition. If there's 3 Warlocks for DPS, you probably don't need it. But any other composition, you're going to want one for the combat advantage. And then Drist for the extra multiplicative damage increase. You could run Portobello Da Vinci, but if your DPS don't need the entire 7%, the 3.5% power, 3.5% combat advantage, then it's really not worth running. I would run these 5 instead. Mount page now. Combat mount power. I would recommend to every tank use the Hag's Cauldron, the Perilous Polymorph Potion. It's going to be the best for Dungeons and Trials. So it's going to reduce defense and crit avoid by 9.8% each on a boss. Other ones that would be recommended, especially for first boss, Master Jotunskar. You would have your Winter's Wrath from Snow Tusk. It increases target's incoming damage by 20.7%, and it's an AoE, so you can get all 3 enemies in that first boss. And then also recommend the Vortex, which is kind of the same thing, 20.7% in AoE. This is, I think it's a much larger AoE, so it's not easy to hit all 3. And then the last one I would recommend is the Panther. I don't have it, unfortunately. So the Phantom Panther, again, it's 20.7% more damage, and it's an AoE. So very useful for first boss MJS. And then equip power. If you're a tank, you're mostly going to run pack tactics for the extra combat advantage and awareness for you and your team. Other alternatives, if you don't have pack tactics, I would use Mystic Aura in case your healer doesn't use it, or maybe the healer has pack tactics they can use. And if you're really in a pinch, I would use Runic Aura for extra power and extra defense for you and your team. Otherwise, again, pack tactics is always the one you're going to want to run, unless you don't have it. And then for my Insignia bonuses, here's what I'm using. 1 Gladiator's Guile, 1 Lionheart's Perseverance, 1 Tactician's for extra encounters during Artifact Call, and then 2 Guardian Spirit for the extra defense and hit points. Then kind of using a smattering of different kind of insignias here. Again, if you look at the build document, it'll show you exactly how many and of which insignias I'm using here. Page 9. So that's it for mouse there. And then the 5 collars are the typical ones. Encounter power damage, rough AD, crit sev, movement speed, and stam regen. Nothing too surprising there. So in terms of total stats, this is kind of what the stat breakdown looks like. You can see it in the build document here. Everything procced, including the Allies Resilience, which is what a healer should be running in MJS. And also the Master Boon Blessed Resilience, everything go ahead and procs. It's going to be capped on defense at 120. Awareness, we're going to be at 89.5. Crit avoid, when we're in rage plus our block mechanic, which gives us an extra 15% crit avoid, we're going to be at 89%. Then power, again, I'm sacrificing some power to get higher crit strike, so this is going to be at 52.5%. And then crit strike is going to be maxed out at 51%. Or 56% if you have an Oathbound Paladin healer with the extra crit strike aura of 5%. And then consumables, using the typical ones, the Potion of Defense, Elixir of Steadfast Devotion, using the Empowered Chain of Scales from Chult for the extra awareness, Honey Bread for defense and HP, and then Fizzy Brew for the 5% awareness and 10% movement speed. And then for my belt item for the damage, I'm using Dragonfire. Very helpful first boss MJS. You can switch over to the Owlbear if you'd like for second and third boss, but I'm too lazy. I just keep on Dragonfire for everything. Alright, so we'll go ahead and do an example of the rotation here. Let me just get some rage real quick. Alright, so we'll go for it. Mount, artifact, rage, slash, encounters, daily, slash, belt, and then encounters again. And about 48 seconds there. So that should be good. That rotation, you get that off inside an artifact call. That will hold 99.9% of all DPS in the game. So you should have no issues holding aggro if you do that rotation just like that. And again, if you have a truncated artifact call due to some boss mechanic or something else that doesn't allow you to get the whole rotation off, just make sure you do the at least half rage, slash, encounters, and then daily after you're mounted artifact, okay? That should be good enough for, I would say, 99% of the population. So yeah, that's the video, that's the build. If you guys have any questions or concerns, please let me know in the comments. Again, the build document is in the description. Appreciate you coming by, and I will check you on the next one. See ya.